Okay. Good morning, friends. Nice to be back this Sunday again. And our speaker this morning is Mr. S. Gopalan. I want to extend a very warm welcome to Gopalan ji and also want to express my thanks for accepting this invitation to speak before the Indore Study Circle. Uh, Mr. Gopalan hardly needs any introduction in a Kismuti circle, but for those who are going to listen to him for the first time, I'll very briefly tell them that Mr. Gopalan professionally is a chartered accountant. He has been a teacher, and his association with the Valley School and Krishnamurti's teachings has been more than 4 decades, or close to 4 decades. He has written a number of books on case teachings, and this morning he is going to talk to us on last thought and next birth, validation from J. Krishnamurti. With these words, I welcome Mr. Gopalan once again and request him to, sir, please go ahead and start your discourse.
Thank you, Dubey. It's not a discourse. It's more observations which I have, which I would like to be really challenged if you don't agree. Yes. See, this expression, the last thought decides the next birth, is very, very common in India. Does this have any validation from Krishnamurti, or is it just something that we believe because it has come through the ages? The first question that comes is, why do we want validation? Validation is it a reassurance that we are looking for? And if so, who is going to provide this validation or the reassurance? Only somebody whom we consider to be on a higher pedestal and authority. Otherwise, there is no validation from anybody. And some of Krishnamurti's observations in his talks go in this direction. In a talk in 1969, he said, don't accept a thing the speaker is saying. He has no authority. And then he continued to say, personally, if I may project a little bit of a personal thing, I have never read any book of all these matters. And a questioner asked him, how did you find it? And Krishnamurti's response was, how did I find it? Very simply, don't look to another, look to yourself, learn, find out. That means you have to keep awake, watchful, listen. And to keep awake, there is no school to keep you awake, no system. And you have to watch what you do, what you think, what you feel, how you talk, how you walk. And because we are lazy, and that's why we look to another. We want others to work, to climb the hill and tell us all about it, and us sit in a comfortable chair. So, having listened to that, then the question comes, does validation have any place at all? Well, definitely not as a reassurance or a reconfirmation, but to check or prove the validity or accuracy of what one is thinking. That is a tremendous responsibility that we have in this process of inquiry. Thought intellect has a very, very valuable role to play, and that is to see the false as the false. So doubt is essential, but doubt has to be kept on a leash. So in the tradition, it has been said, the last thought decides the next birth. Is there any way this can be validated logically and rationally? So that brings up the question, what is the background or the backdrop of this statement, last thought and the next birth? And we tend to think it is the theory of reincarnation. Now, the theory of reincarnation assumes an entity that will reincarnate. So it's based on an assumption. Is there any other way of looking at this? And Krishnamurti made an interesting observation in 1971. He said, quote, when one dies, that's the ending of not only your organism, and the brain with all its content, the stream goes on because you are part of the stream. You are part of that stream. Therefore, that stream manifests itself in the baby, in the man, in the adolescent, and with various varieties of names and characteristics. I want careful, please. You must apply your mind to this. So that stream is enduring. And from that stream, there is manifestation. So this is one validation, I would say, about this whole thing of not reincarnation, but having the next birth, or in some way, consciousness expressing itself again through a body. Now, birth is a material manifestation in consciousness. And therefore, if you look at the structure of matter, the structure of matter is quite old. Sometime around 5 BCE, the Greeks proposed the atomic model. And then for nearly 2000 years, nothing was done to that theory. 1803, John Dalton came up with his solid sphere model, reconfirming what the Greeks thought, that material is made up of indivisible particles, which he called atoms. Then in 1904, 100 years later, you have Thomson coming up with this plum pudding model, which talked of electrons orbiting. And then Rutherford and Bohr in 1911 came up with the nuclear or the planetary model with a nucleus and electrons orbiting around that. In 1926, Schrödinger and Chadwick came up with the quantum model, which then talked of subatomic particles, and then energy behaving as wave, energy behaving as matter. And that has come to the present day standard model, which is still making discoveries. In 2012, there was this Higgs boson, which was discovered. 2021, a subparticle called the tetra quark was discovered. It goes on and on and on. There's no end, obviously. But it all really started around 1900 when Einstein came up with his path-breaking formula, E is equal to mc squared, essentially pointing out that energy converts into matter and matter converts to energy. Now, the Western model of cosmology talks of the Big Bang about 8 billion years ago, when suddenly there was an explosion and the universe was created. But that theory is silent about how that energy came into existence, and it is silent about consciousness. So you are stuck, really. There is nothing further in that direction that you can inquire into. On the other hand, the Vedic view, which has prevailed in this land, essentially said consciousness arises from the interaction of energy and matter. So matter is energy, but presenting itself in a predetermined form. Therefore, that predetermined form as knowledge must have existed even before the matter got created. So where would it exist? It has to exist within energy itself. And that gives rise to one of the biggest mysteries, that when energy is all intelligent, everything, why does that allow this knowledge which is in it to separate itself out? That's a mystery. Our thought intellect can't answer it, but we can hold that question. So consciousness begins with the separation of this ego from energy, because ego is nothing but knowledge. So the ego is very, 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 very deep. It's at the origin of matter itself. It's not just something in our intellect here where we are today. So Krishnamurti talked about this as a state without a cause, where the separation had not happened. Now, the separation of the ego allows it to arise in organisms that have a physical body and then have experiences. And because it has experiences, knowledge can accumulate along with the emotions that these experiences generate. And these emotions give rise to desires. And desire is that energy which keeps extending the stream, making the stream flow. Now, the stream of manifestation comes into the physical body, but over aeons of time, memories have added to the knowledge, and these have formed layers of consciousness. So what we talk about as thought intellect is the most superficial layer, but there are many layers below, and they all are consist of the same energy and matter giving rise to consciousness, and that consciousness accumulating knowledge. So the implications of this become very interesting. Intellectual questioning will not end the ego. It can only start the journey. And if you look at the biography of any of these seers, the I suddenly ended in them. There's no explanation why it happened at that time. It ended. And in the Brockwood Bulletin of 1968, Krishnamurti wrote a little piece which later got printed in Meeting Life. And the end of that piece, he said, "Be alone sometimes, and if you are lucky, it might come to you on a falling leaf or from the distant solitary tree in an empty field." So that's a clear indication that all you can do is maintain the inquiry, and then it will happen when it will happen. Again, in the Vedic view, they came up with these 5 sheets, they call it, the koshas. The Anandamaya kosha, Vijnanamaya kosha, Manomaya kosha, Pranamaya kosha, and the Annamaya kosha. And they divided these 5 koshas into 3 bodies. There's the causal body, there's the astral body, and then there is the physical body. This can be validated in the process of death. And that's the interesting thing. There are this process of death, if you look at it again from the Western perspective, until 1968, death was considered to have taken place if 2 things happened. One was respiration had ceased and circulation had ceased. So both these were verified by cessation of breathing and cessation of heartbeat. If these 2 conditions are satisfied, person was declared dead. But then medical technology brought in these life extension machines. And so in 1968, they came up with a 3rd definition. They call it brain dead. So respiration could have stopped, heartbeat could have stopped, but you're still not dead. And that is the point when an organ can be transplanted. And today we have organ transplanting happening in a regular big way. So brain dead becomes the 3rd definition. But the Vedic view and also the Buddhist view comes in through 2 books. One is the Garuda Purana and the other is the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Now, what they essentially point out is death doesn't happen in an instant when the heartbeat ceases or the breathing ceases. Death is a process of withdrawal of energy. Withdrawal of energy from each of these layers. So in the Tibetan book, it's explained very graphically that the body has been made out of these 5 elements. So first the earth element collapses into the water, then water collapses into fire, fire into air, air into space, and finally space into the ego. Now every stage of these collapses is accompanied by certain sensations in the body. It's accompanied by certain noises, by certain smells, and all this can be watched. It's only a process of dissolution, dissolving. There's nothing to be afraid. This is the message of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. What use has this documentation to? That's where it becomes very interesting, because what they point out is the same journey is replicated every day when you go to sleep. And therefore, you can observe this for yourself every day. And therefore, when that last moment arrives, it's not something that you're unprepared for. So, both Tibetan and Vedic views are saying that at death, it is only the physical body that dies. That is the Annamaya Kosha and the Pranamaya Kosha. The astral body, which is the emotional body, continues. And therefore, it needs a body to express itself. It can't express itself in the emotional world alone. And therefore, you see that this idea of ghosts and spirits is not all that daft. If we have strong emotions at the point of death, body dies and the emotions remain, those emotions are going to be around, and that's the spirits. So Krishnamurti had something to say on this. He said, to go back, the deliberate intention, the collection of intentions, the thinking it over, which is all the deep intention to hurt, is part of will. I think that is where evil is, the deliberate act to hurt. You hurt me, I hurt you, I apologize, and it is finished. But if I hold, retain, strengthen deliberately, follow a policy to hurt you, which is part of the will in man to do harm or good, then there is evil. So, emotional body is an accumulation of these unworked out emotions, unreleased emotions, and this is going to perpetuate itself. And beyond all that is the causal body, where all the leftover causes are there which need to be worked out. This is the theory from the Tibetan and the Hindu and the Jain, all these Indian systems. And there seems to be a certain logic in it. It's not just blind belief. And they all point out something. Only the human living allows you to break from this cycle. Why? Because the human living has the faculty of thought intellect. Thought intellect can formulate questions, and these questions are the beginning of inquiry. And as inquiry proceeds, it is possible to see the false as the false and discard it. That's the only thing we can do. And therefore, the human birth is of extraordinary importance. So naturally, a manipulative intellect then asks, is it possible to direct the birth towards a human birth? When the point of death, is it possible to direct oneself towards a human birth rather than some other birth? Because only in the human birth is there the possibility of freedom. And from that came this statement, the last thought determines the next birth. So can this be planned and worked for? It's an interesting question. Now, last thought, last breath, last heartbeat. These can be called last only after death has happened. You can't say it's the last breath before death has happened. So while we are alive, the present thought that I am having, the present breath that I am breathing, the present heartbeat that I'm having may be the last. We don't know. Therefore, if one wants to direct thought, the last thought, the only thing we can do is to direct the present thought. We can't do anything about the last thought. Therefore, every thought has to be focused on this objective. Can't afford to move away from this thought into anything else. That's a logical conclusion. Now, if we look at the culture of this land, India, this idea has deeply got into the psyche, and there are many practices which have been followed keeping this in mind. Let me just point out a few. The first is, how do you name your children? Today the objective is, can I give a name which has never been found anywhere else in the world? We try to look for something unique. But the culture said, give a name of one of your gods or goddesses, depending on whether the child is a boy or a girl. Why is that? Because the logic was very simple. At the last moment, When you have an intuition that death is approaching, every person tends to call his children. When you call a name, that word starts up inquiries, not just memories, not just which are current, but also very, very, very deep down. And that is why there are so many of these Puranic stories which point out that somebody who was considered most evil, at the last moment he thought of Shiva or Vishnu and he was redeemed. Because that last, it was not a conscious effort which made him call that name. That was the cumulative effect of everything that he had done. So this was one of the reminders to oneself, naming children. The second is in India, there is this very popular concept of uh, reciting the Sahasranama, 1001 names. For every god, there is 1001 names. Now, listening to Krishnamurti say that you can just as well repeat Ave Maria or Coca-Cola or any other mechanical repetition, we discard all this. But is chanting only mechanical repetition? When your mind is attentive to what you are saying, each one of these names in the Sahasranama describes certain qualities which you think is there in that God, which you don't have. So thinking about those names, keeping your mind on that, it's making you think about those qualities. So if you are chanting the Sahasranama at the last breath, your mind is on that when your breath leaves. You haven't consciously done it, but just chanting it did it. Third thing is this whole role of prayer. Krishnamurti many times made this statement. Prayer implies supplication, begging, asking, demanding. Now, most prayers are like that. We only pray when we feel the pain and we need relief. So most prayers are begging. Yes, that is true. But are all prayers only begging? Now the mind tends to convert everything to this technique where it can get something. Ramana Maharishi, right through his life, had only one approach. Anybody who came to a question, he said, who is it that is asking the question? I am asking the question. Find out who that I is. That was all he said. Now, after he has gone, this who am I has become a mantra. So there are systems which advocate you sitting at one place and chanting, who am I, who am I, who am I, who am I. But that is not what he said. We have made a mantra out of it. We have made a system. We have tried to make a system out of it. Right? Whereas what he was pointing out was inquire. And to inquire, you have to have attention. So is there a prayer which is not a supplication, which is not begging, which is not asking? And I think there is. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. May all beings be happy. Is not begging for anything. And I think that that kind of a prayer comes from a very deep understanding that I can't benefit unless the whole universe benefits. So may all beings be happy. And then sometimes there are these religious events which are organized for the good of world, for the good of mankind, for the good of everybody. These are not begging. We have somewhere clubbed it all together and lost the meaning of it. So 1984 in Rajghat, Krishnamurti made a statement which I was astounded by when I read it the first time. This is, you must recall, just a year and a quarter before he died. Let me read this little passage to you. It's very, very interesting. This is Rajghat, 1984. One of the strange things is India is a very sad country, but there is always a smile. Haven't you noticed it? The poor smile. They are starving, they smile. No? And that is the miracle of this country. They are starving, downtrodden, no means of happiness. They are perpetually working. And yet, as you go by on the street, especially in the country, they smile at you. This happens nowhere in the world. That is one of the great things of this country. This is Krishnamurti. Huh? I'm not reading anybody else. Now, why? Why do the poor smile? And I would say it's the legacy of this cultural heritage that we have. What is this legacy of the cultural heritage? Very briefly, it is life neither begins with birth nor ends with death. The circumstances, conditions, and environment of living is entirely self created. They are the result that follow action done with motive. Escape is not possible from these results. They have to be expiated by going through them. Reacting to circumstances, conditions, and environment of living, including attempts to escape, only result in adding to the bank of unexpressed actions that need to be worked out, and this perpetuates the cycle of birth, death, and next birth. Freedom, which is breaking through this cycle of birth, death, and next birth, is entirely in one's hands and it is not dependent upon any external source. Freedom arises only in understanding that this cycle is perpetuated by the motive, and therefore, and all motive comes from the identification of the self I. Now, this wisdom comes through the language used every day in India, in any Indian language. Unfortunately, we have got into this monoculture of English language, which has cut us off from all our Indian languages. Hardly most of us, I would say, the language in which we think is English. We don't think in Indian languages. Multilingual thinking doesn't happen with us. Now, Krishnamurti's upbringing closed him to all Indian languages, right? Are we following that pattern blindly? So, then comes this whole legacy of this heritage that we have. Is it all just conditioning? See, Krishnamurti said, you mean wisdom is brought through a book, through a teacher, from another, through sacrifice, torture, renunciation? He was talking about this in the context of a group of sannyasis who met him in Kashmir in 1953. And they said, how can we let go of this heritage that we have? This was his response to them. And I would like to bring you to another statement of Krishnamurti, where he said, perception of truth from which arises wisdom. Wisdom is the daughter of truth, and intelligence is the daughter of wisdom. Now, this wisdom, which is expressed, the expression is not wisdom. The expression is through words. So the expression is not wisdom. But last time we talked about reverse engineering. And I think if words can be reverse engineered to bring that insight from where they were made. Otherwise, why do we preserve Krishnamurti's talks and writings? They're only words. The words have a value because in studying them, in going through them, it is possible to get that insight from which he gave. From which he made those statements. But if Krishnamurti's statements can do that, any other statement can do that as well. So why do we need to make a separation between what we read or study? I would like to end with a little passage that he said in 1974 in Bangalore. It means that you grown-up people, grown-up men behaving like children and not capable of standing alone. You are educated, you have read books, you have children, families, and you depend on somebody to tell you what to do. Therefore, you have destroyed your minds. That's what has happened in India. You cannot think for yourself. You repeat endlessly what somebody else has said, and you think you are terribly religious. You are not. Forgive me for saying so. You are not religious at all. This was a 1974 talk in Bangalore. And therefore, my question at the end is, it seems to me that this is the only challenge. Can we think for ourselves? Because that's the beginning of inquiry. What triggers that inquiry? What facilitates that inquiry needs to be retained. Anything that comes in the way of this inquiry, any theory, any belief, any acceptance has to be negated because it's coming in the way of inquiry. Inquiry alone is all that matters. And the last thought determines the next breath, next death, birth, is a thought that needs to be held on to and inquired because it points out to how Our mind is every moment while we are alive. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gopalan. I think very interesting talk. And there are lots of gray areas, and I'm sure people will have things to ask, because Christie was never categorical when people asked him, is there life after death? But I have with me a small passage when he was talking to Buddhist scholars in Rockwood Park in June 1979, where one of the Buddhist scholars asked him, "Sir, is there life after death?" And he says, when the body dies, the desires, the anxieties, the tragedies, and the misery go on. They go on contributing to the vast common stream in which mankind lives. Each of us is representative of the whole of that stream. By inquiring into the whole nature of suffering, can one end it and be out of the stream? The free inquiry into suffering is insight. As long as I accept any authority, Buddhist or otherwise, can there be insight? And lastly, he said a beautiful thing. He says, for the man who is no longer a manifestation of the stream, intelligence, love, and compassion are operating. I think beyond that, he didn't say anything, but I leave it to others. I think there'll be lots of questions on this. We'll start with Dr. Harshad Parekh. Yes, sir. Please unmute yourself.
Yes. Are you able to hear my voice?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. I think that we really don't know what happens after the body dies. But there is in the philosophy, Indian and Buddhist, that something survives. And what I feel that there are three states of matter, like solid, liquid, and gas. So water exists as a vapor, which is a gaseous state. Then water is a liquid, and ice is a solid state. So similarly, I feel that matter, energy, and consciousness are three states of the same substance. And consciousness is the most subtle, invisible. And then from that comes energy, which can be felt. And then from energy comes matter, and the matter can be seen. So, of course, this is just an idea, and everything what we are saying, because nobody has really died and come back to life, but a lot of research has been done about this subject of uh, born again, and people have remembered their past lives, and people have done a lot of research, and they have found that some people, they remember their past life, and it has been verified. So I myself also feel that something survives when our body dies. And my imagination is that what scriptures call Atman, which is a very, very pure, and it cannot be destroyed, this Atman, by fire and so on. But around this Atman, there are layers of suffering, thoughts, feelings. And so when the body dies, this Atman, along with this karma, sanskar, it also exists, and it takes place in another body. And so a rebirth takes place. And how we have lived now, that determines what our life will be in future. And so there is a kind of a evolution which goes on, and until when this Atman is free, there are no layers of ignorance, then there is no more birth of the body takes place. So this is a philosophy, and of course we cannot verify it, but it seems logical that how we live now, it determines what happens next moment. And Krishnamurti also talks about this theory of karma, and he doesn't go very, very far into the next life or previous life, but he comes from the present moment to the next moment. So how we live every moment, that is very, very important. And then if we are living rightly now, then that our future life will be taken care of. Okay, so I have said enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Shakti ji, please unmute yourself.
Yes, my voice is reaching, sir.
Yes,
My voice is reaching. Yeah.
it's very loud. Make it a little.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it was, I was listening to it, and this metaphysics of Krishnamurti, metaphysics in Krishnamurti's discourse, that is little bit not very clear, is neither theist nor atheist, even not agnostic. There is something which is very difficult to grasp. At the same time, you see, for me, it has been very difficult to believe in hereafter, God, and whatever it is. I don't reject it, but intellectually it is very difficult to believe in these things. Yet, what Krishnamurti talks about choiceless awareness, and what he talks about, the question of thought, having insight into thought, all those matters are very valuable for me for living this life. At the same time, it's not question of rejecting also, because some sort of shraddha happens automatically when you, for example, when Krishnamurti told Mr. Friedrich Blohe that for him reincarnation is a fact for Krishnamurti. So it gives some sort of, you don't stick to your opinion. You don't stick to your intellectual conclusions. That is one thing. But those postulations, those givens are not important to work with Krishnamurti's message in whatsoever, in as much as one can. So that is one thing. And I would like to ask it, because what I read extensively, I've read extensively as much as possible Krishnamurti. And I feel there is something like in him, the theory is, metaphysical theory is that it's not the persons who are taking birth, but there is a whole, cluster of tendencies which is coming into existence, and it is same like now I am not an individual, I am an expression of a cluster of tendencies, and the same thing remains afterwards also when the body is no more. This is what I have understood academically. So please say something about it, because it seems that the idea of personal reincarnation doesn't seem to somehow click with Krishnamurti discourse. Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Yes,
Shakti.
I agree with you. We have a tendency to make everything personal. So when somebody talks of reincarnation, we assume it to be personal. Let me just give you a viewpoint of what Ramana Maharishi said, because that made eminent sense to me. In a discussion, somebody asked him, is everything that is going to happen in my life already predetermined? And he said, yes, every single act which is going to take place in your life is already predetermined. So then this man asked the Maharishi, does that mean I have no freedom? And the Maharishi's response was, you always have the freedom to understand that you are not that. Now, that I think to really be able to understand it and it to manifest itself in my living is the movement. So that is to me a negation of the false as the false. I am not the body. Yeah, it's easy to state that, but when the body is in pain, I don't think I'm able to say I am not the body. The pain is very much part of me. It's everything, in fact. So I think those are those moments when holding this question helps. It's a matter of you have to experience it for yourself, I feel. I don't think there is any other way.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, Verma sir, please unmute yourself.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes.
Am I audible? Okay. A very interesting topic again today. It has so many things. Thought, next birth. Last takes up time. Thought takes up matter and memory. Next birth takes continuity. So a number of things are included in this topic. And it has so many things. And thinking about them is also very interesting to me. A number of questions are linked with time, whether it is linear or circular, whether relative or cyclical. So many, unless, and each concept, I will say these are concepts, each concept gives you a story around it. My question till today is, we very frequently we talk, we have to be alert, attentive, moment to moment. Whether each moment is distinctly different than other moment, if yes, then what makes it different? Where is that moment in consciousness? Is there any corresponding material reality of moment? So these questions, some of these questions are there. And another thing is, I was reading your book, Can a Part Comprehend the Whole? I am being limited, I'm a part in a way. Here a number of questions germinate. What is the state of questioner? What is the state of questioner here? J.K. said, you are the world. Deepak Chopra said, you are the universe. Nisarg Dutt said, you are that. Quantum says, you are not what you think you are. So then another statement, very interesting, he is everything who is nothing. Then Aham Brahmasmi. So all these questions, although I have read these things, I have thought about these things, I enjoy thinking about these things, but certain, these make you think again and again. So especially whether each moment is different is still an important question for me. And out of these, of course, you may, if you like, respond. Dr. Gopalan, Shri Gopalanji, I'll be very happy if you can say something about these things today. Although I have a question about assertions, you said that arguments, assertion, then you have facts and beliefs in assertion. So that way, every book is assertion, everything we read, we have read is assertion, and the force I find enough force in your books, in your statements. Thank you very much. Gopalan ji, please
Yeah.
respond. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Verma. Somewhere I feel that more powerful than all these talks of the seers are stories. Because stories have a way of worming themselves inside you, and when they dissolve, their message remains in you. So stories are very, very powerful. So I will first narrate one story which I read, which I think answers most of your questions. There was this disciple who came to the Guru, and he was with him for 20 years, religiously following everything that the Guru asked him to do. But he had no experience. So one day he asked the Guru, all these practices that I am following, are they going to help me see the truth? And the Guru said, no, they are not going to help you see the truth. So then the Shishya asked, why have you asked me to do this for 20 years without a break? And he said, that is just for you to be awake when the sun rises. And I think that's a tremendous story. This is all we can do. Through the word, we can't get the meaning, but to hold on to these questions which you have raised, just to keep the questions there all the time, I think is extraordinarily important. So this whole question of moment and time, it's obviously something that we hold most of the time. And my understanding of it is that time comes into existence only when that I comes into existence. If there is no I, there is no time. So the moment which we talk about, we imagine what a moment is. But in the moment, we actually mean when we are completely immersed, where there is no sense of I. And that is the moment. We can only know that moment when we are out of it because thought has arisen again.
Okay.
That's my understanding. Only by negation that, I had a moment, now I'm out of it, is all that. Then, of course, thought immediately says, how do I get back? And we watch that circus of thought all the time, it's trying to get that same experience again, which it can't do. And I think one has to just remain with these questions and let it unfold itself. And this is where I find the wealth of these Puranic stories. They're all personified, but if you hold on to them, you find there's a very deep meaning in these stories, a depth of meaning, in fact, which they reveal to you when you keep on holding on to them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Dinesh Waghmare.
Are you able to listen to me, sir? Sir, you have opened a very big discussion, and it's a very vast subject, basically. It cannot be covered in any small dialogue like this. But basically what you said, last thought and the next birth. So actually, as far as my understanding goes and my study goes, it is not about the last thought. It has been just said to the mob that if they are having the name of any god, so that he can get the help in the next incarnation. That is what the original philosophy is. It is just for the said to the common man or the mob, which doesn't understand deeply the secret of the energies, basically. So actually, what are the secrets of energies? We have to go. You have said that you have talked about causal body, astral body, and physical body. We also practically see that physical body goes. What is astral body? Astral body is constituents are intellect, emotions, and feelings. And what is causal body? Causal body are basically the drives and the instincts which he has taken. The Jeev has taken birth. They have called it Jivatma. They have not called it Atma, as somebody, particularly I think Shakti Kumar was saying. But it is a Jivatma. So Jivatma is different from the Atma. Jivatma is the bundle of energies which constitute his causal body and which are having the basic drives. What are those drives which are left in the last incarnation? So practically, if we see, okay, leave aside all these things, theory and all that. We see energy can be converted into matter, and thought is also a matter. So we see basically the drives. What are our thoughts? Thoughts are basically, as JK said, these are coming from our conditioning. But how the conditioning are formed? Conditionings are formed because of our attraction towards those things which are our drives, instincts. So those instincts and drives are basically, those are the energies which, when expressed, come into the thought form or material form. So we can very easily see that whatever the aspects in our life we complete, those thoughts don't bother us, or they drop us, they completely drop. So whatever is left, whatever the drives or instincts are left, we can very easily see that those may continue. It is accepted that we don't know exactly whether incarnation is there or not, but we can accept the theory that whatever drives are left or instincts surges are left, those may manifest into the another form, or into the another may incarnate. So we see very easily that this is possible, because even if we see in daily life also, what thoughts we what we do the planning, whatever our ideas are or our desires are left, according to which we plan to go, or we set our goals according to that. So we can easily see even ego under ignorance, what ego plans. Ego plans as per his drives or instinct. So the key is the instinct. So what is this causal body? Causal body are basically the instincts or drives which are left, and astral body is which is constitutes of or we can say the conditioned body, which is the constituted by your feelings, your emotions, your intellectual whatever you have accumulated. Those go as per the after your death. So it is very clear. Now, even you said that there is no. Yeah, sir. Just a moment.
Permit me to interrupt. What is your question? Why don't you come to the question directly?
No, I'm just giving my observation, sir, on Gopalan sir. He said that there is no birth after this enlightened persons or that. But there are examples in our even Purans. He was giving the examples of Puran. If suppose any enlightened person has got some drives left, so that remains, or that those may give birth to he may take a birth into animal kingdom for a short while, for a short time, and then he may go again. So Jivan Mukta can also have a short birth into animal kingdom, which is called Bhog Yoni basically. It is not a Karma Yogi, it is a Bhog Yoni, and he may go back. So of course there is a lot can be talked about this, but right now I can talk only up to this. What are Gopalan sir's views? Thank you.
You didn't raise any question. You only explained what you say is happening. We are not discussing that philosophy, right? What I'm only saying, the question, what is coming out very clearly to us is the state of our mind at the moment of death is going to decide what is going to happen in your next life, which means you can't predict which is the moment of death. So the state of the mind at every moment of living is all that I can attend to. That's all that I have to do. That's at the end, that's the message that I get from reading all this. So all that matters is pay attention to your state of mind at this moment.
Thank you, Mr. Gopal. We'll go to Mr. Prasad Mulupuri. Yes, sir.
Sir, it's a very scholarly discussion, and Gopalan Sahab has, made very profound comments. He has a science background and all that. I don't have all that. I don't have that science background to know about stopping of breathing or stopping of the brain function and things like that, or about energy and matter and all that. But my fascination with Krishnaji is that he has removed from discussion all those things. Both the scientific scholarship and the philosophical scholarship. He has just asked you to pay attention to yourself, your own being choicelessly aware and all things like that. So he has brought truth from books and high heavens to normal living, daily living. And how do we know whether there is a life after death or not? Anything will be only an assumption. If I say there is life after death, that is a kind of a statement, an assumption for which there is no evidence. So in India, there is so much of scholarship, Puranic scholarship. Everything ultimately is made to correspond to what the seers have said or the Puranas have said and things like that. So can we proceed only with what for which there is evidence? Like thought is a product of the past. A statement like that, you can verify for yourself whether it is or it is not. But when I say there is life after death, how do I know? And sir, is it not an ego, a manifestation of your ego that you think that there is a life after death? If there is a life after death for me, there should be a life after death for a swallow or a tiger or a cow, etc. Everything should have some rebirth or whatever, or life after, some type of life after that. And how do we, a tree also, if it is dead today, maybe it has a life after death. How do we know? We need not enter into all that area, that controversial area. That is my feeling, sir. And let us stick to what is verifiable in our life. And with that, Gopalan Sahab, what he has said, that your ultimate thought will determine your further afterlife. That can happen even from having a good life. Thank you, sir.
Sir, first of all, I should clarify, I did not say that there is a next life. I only pointed out a statement which was made and I was investigating that. See, Krishnamurti at one point talked about the fact that there is a religious inquiry and there is scientific investigation. The scientific investigation can never answer the questions of the religious inquiry, but the religious inquiry includes in it the scientific investigation. So the scientific investigation is holding on to that question, seeing that an answer actually puts a stop to inquiry. And therefore, every answer, what is the next question that it leads to, and holding on to that question. I think that is really the scientific process, which definitely we have to do here and not accept anything because it has been said in the Puranas. Why I am raising this? In fact, last few sessions here at Indore, I have been raising this again and again, is because I am seeing how we, the educated, in the last 50 or 70 years, have cut ourselves off from the heritage that is available in this land, and we are perpetuating it through the process of education, for our children and grandchildren, right? If you go 2 generations ago, we spoke and thought in at least 3 languages. Today we have become one language, English. And therefore, that accumulated wisdom which is available here is being lost to us. You can get it through a translation, but we are straight away discard it, saying anyway it is old, conditioned, etc., etc., etc. See, the very simple fact about thought is there has to be a recognition for a thought to happen. That recognition comes from the accumulated memory which goes to the beginning of the universe. It's not a personal recognition. And therefore, every thought has in it the accumulated memories from the time the universe started. And that's why there is a logic when they say the last thought decides, because the last thought carries with it all the memories from the beginning of time. So in that moment, you have access to all that. So every moment is an opportunity, and that's the window. So you are never separating yourself from that. And I was particularly struck by that talk of Krishnamurti in 1984. Only once he has ever talked like that, when he said the miracle of India. Otherwise, it generally tends to be very critical of India, right? But that place, when he said, pointed out that the poor smile, and this is the miracle of this land. I asked myself, if this is the miracle of this land, am I encouraging the next generation to remain here and understand this miracle? Or am I encouraging them to go to the West because there is nothing left in this land? I'm looking at my own journey and what I have contributed in this process. As a teacher, as a parent, as a grandparent, I'm doing it all the time. And I think one of the things that has happened to us because of the way the education has happened is we have just got cut off from the heritage that we have. And that has come because partly because we have lost the link to the language, but partly because there's this belief in scientific investigation. But that scientific investigation, which we imagine, is a very, very narrow thing. It refuses to investigate psychic phenomena because it says we can't measure it. So it's a very narrow compartment. That's a very blinkered view of science. Now we are understanding that scientific investigation is much wider.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll go to Mr. Ravi. Please unmute yourself and put your video on. Mr. Ravi.
Good morning. I have a question. Can one remain with the thought throughout his life? Because I do feel that I can't remain with the thought for a moment. Thought is a flux, comes and goes. So how can I remain with the thought? And if not, then how will I proceed? And second thing, I have come to a realization that I cannot cultivate anything, including what Krishnamurti suggested, like cultivating the self-awareness, attention, not attention, but they are part of it, attention, awareness. And so if I cannot cultivate those things, where I will lead my inquiry, and what is the right inquiry and what is the right question to inquire into it?
I don't think he has talked about cultivating anything. Yes, Mr. Gopalan.
Yeah, see, I don't know who said that we have to remain with a thought. That's again an idea that I have to remain with a thought. Can I be aware of this thought? I think that's different from remaining with the thought. Can I just be aware with the thought, the motive behind it, the energy behind it? Can I be aware? Because the tendency of thought is not to reveal itself. It brings the next thought so that you never get down to the motive that is the energy behind it. And therefore, the question of cultivation also doesn't arise. Can I just be aware of the thought that I have at this moment? Its entire history, its entire story.
Yes, Durga ji, please unmute yourself. Yes, Durga ji, I think she is not there. We'll go to Shakti ji. Yes, Shakti ji, unmute yourself. Yes, Durga ji is back. Yeah, please unmute yourself. Unmute. Yeah. Unmute.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I'm audible, no, sir?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Gopalan, sir. Yeah, it's a very interesting discourse. Definitely, you brought lot of scientific views, as well as you quoted our ancient heritage and dharmas and shastras and all of that. And you brought to the question of inquiry. So I feel, as per me, I think the Krishnaji's teaching revolves more and more about inquiry. He stated so much about each and everything in this, about human consciousness, about the world, about the universe. But ultimately, he says, unless and until you use your own intelligence, you use your own common sense, and you start asking questions, you start inquiring into anything, you won't understand anything. I have stated everything to you. I have laid out entire, the wisdom or insights before you, but those are my insights. You can't hang on to them, or they won't be of any use to you unless you yourself don't ask questions. So for me, that has gone very deep in the very beginning of reading of Krishnaji's books. And sir, I would like to say, I think today's discourse, you have stated so much about our ancient, the common lore of statements and the dictums or as statements that are very familiar in our day-to-day, you can say living, or in our common culture. So initially, to bring all those aspects into Krishnaji's discourse also used to be some kind of people used to hesitate, because Krishnaji used to give very less importance to those elements, according to my understanding. Though he did bring, he did say in few as areas that that ancient wisdom and heritage of India is very deep and very vast. But somehow he always used to, his daily focus is all about our own living, day-to-day living. So when am I going to take responsibility of myself? Why are we so hesitant to take the responsibility of the self at all? If I don't use my intelligence, then who is the entity? Yes, why do I have to be, why is there so much of confusion about it? Krishna did say about the thought, the conditioning, and he did say it is not individual self. But unless and until that entity who has to think for itself, who has to use its own intelligence, why are we shying away from it? Where is the freedom going to come? It is not going to come into collective consciousness. One person, if he knows how to stand alone, if he knows how to think for himself, if he start asking questions deep down into the teaching, not only about, the birth and death. The death, he says, dying is no. It's not about, the last moment of your physiological, biological death. Die to the known. Die to your, and how will I know what is the known which I have to die for? So there is the inquiry, the intricate inquiry that has to go into. And you also stated that, seeing the truth and the false. But if the entity who sees the false, he says, inquire about that. That is self-understanding, self-knowledge. If the entity who decides for good and false, does the entity know what is good and false? How will we arrive at good and false? So everything is a question mark for us. Definitely, the understanding of this scientific thought, reasoning is important for us, because he just leaves us on a plain ground. And of course, reading of the texts, the teachings, and the ancient philosophers is very important to us. And the dharma, which says about the ancient text says the goodness, you live a good life, you live with charity, you live with kindness, you live with all those things. That is a good life. There's talk so much about responsibility, the dharma. All these things are, as a human being, if I'm not aware of all these things, why are we shying away from that at all? Definitely, he doesn't say so much about, self. It's only his teaching is, according to me, sir, it is not about, personal salvation. It's not about personal freedom. You need to have some kind of a freedom to go into all these things. Freedom from your day-to-day conflict in your, which is going to sap away your energies. You need to have a freedom there. If you are so engrossed in your day-to-day worries, concerns, ambitions, greed, violence, and everything, where is inquiry for me to go into any other deeper issues of what Krishna is stating? So for that, I need to have this awareness. I need to have what does the Shastras have tell, and I need to pick up from there. And then from there, I have to see into the Krishnaji's teaching. What does he say? Why he did not say? So because it's all unknown area for us. So he leaves you with all the entire, he explains everything to you, but at the same time, unless and until you use your discretion, you don't discrimination and intelligence, or maybe that whatever common sense you have, nothing makes sense to us. But we are not discussing about what the Puranas, Vedas, and the Upanishads have said. We are into the Krishnaji's teaching. What does he have to say? He says, if you don't have order in your life, if your day-to-day life is all the time, riddled with conflicts and strong emotions, you first of all sort them out. Why are they there in the first place? Go into them. Go into each and every emotion till the end of it and end it. Then only something else, there is a scope for something else to happen. So my take on Krishnaji's teaching is that, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Durga Ji. Yes, Shakti Ji, unmute yourself.
Yes, sir. As Gopalan ji said that about the heritage. So I just wanted to present a different aspect also. You see, I have been in a Hindi medium school. I think in Hindi. And Sanskrit was one of my favorite subjects. And I have read the Sanskrit literature, including Gita Upanishads, just for fun. And it's very strange what I'm going to tell you, that after reading all this for many years, because that attracted me, because of the beauty of the language, I reached to this conclusion that it is beautiful, but it is all fiction. It is all imagination. And then when I heard Krishnamurti, when I read Krishnamurti, then I suddenly realized, no, that was not all fiction. There was some truth there also. It was, somewhere. At the same time, I could connect with Gita after reading Krishnamurti. But at the same time, there are horrible things in tradition also, especially about the women, about the so-called low caste people. So I see like so many Kshepakas are there, and it's a mixed package. So with Krishnamurti is not a mixed package, fortunately. So this is personally I feel that we don't know what happens after death, what happens, we cannot, maybe whatever our intellect understands, it is something very different from that. It cannot perhaps express it in a way. So just that I wanted to share. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Shakti Ji. Mr. Abhiskek Pandey, you still have questions or you don't want to ask anything now? Abhiskek Pandey?
I want to ask.
Yeah, please go ahead. Put your video on, please.
Okay, my question is if we gradually reach start and think about it, can we reach the 100% conviction about afterlife or karma phal siddhant to the proper reading, logic, and all these things? What do you think about it? Gopalan from
I'm not able to understand what your question is. Perhaps Mr. Gopalan has heard him. No, he has not.
Sir, he is completely inaudible. Can you increase the volume of your audio, please?
Yes.
Now it is audible, sir?
Yes.
Is it audible?
It's somewhat better.
My question is, sir, we don't
No.
practice meditation and all.
No, your audio is not clear, Mr. Pandey. Your audio is not clear. I think you can write it on the chat box. Maybe that will make it clear.
Okay, now it disconnected. Now it is audible, sir. No, no.
Yes, it is.
Yes. Now my question is, sir, if someone is not doing meditation properly, if he's reading Shastra carefully and try to do understand it, so what do you think? At the last, he will understand that all the principle of afterlife and karma siddhant. Can he get the 100% conviction on this or not? Thank you, sir.
Sir, when you say that meditation not being done properly, that automatically implies that there is a fixed way of doing it, which is the correct way. That is what we have been used to measure, to compare to a standard fixed and then say this is correct or this is not correct. So we need to ask, what do we mean by meditating properly? What is involved in this meditation? So the question has to be there. And I think in holding the question, the answer gets revealed, but the answer is unimportant because it only leads to the next question. So it's only important to hold to the question and let revelation happen.
Thank you. There are quite a few chats by Mr. Shankar. Why don't you ask, Mr. Shankar? Unmute yourself and ask.
Good morning, Gopalanji. Even I was a Theosophical member also. I read in a lot of literature from there. Is it not the thought which has created these concepts of birth and death? Is it not the thought which is making me feel that there's birth, there's death? Is it not the knowledge which has come from people around me, which made me know that there's a birth and death? Because the animals around us also, they take birth and they die. Only thing, they don't know that there is something called birth, there's something called death. They naturally take birth, they naturally die. Thank you, sir. This is my question.
Yes, sir. What you said is absolutely right. It is only because of our thought. That means because of duality. That means because of separating myself from everything else that thought operates. So is that our curse, the human curse, or is that the human opportunity to be able to use that? Because thought cannot think without the separation. So can the thought intellect come in to negate what is false as false? And that can only happen in that state of separation. It can't happen in any other idea. To my understanding, yes, certainly all the things that you said, it is because of I that I'm aware that there is birth and death. It is because of I that I'm aware that there is time. Right? Then, so what is this I? And is there a separation? Is a question that I have to be holding.
Thank you, Mr. Gopalan. I think we'll have the last question from Mr. Waghmare. Yes, please ask the question.
Gopalan sir, what are your views on this life force energy? How does it manifest? What are your views? How does it creates?
So it's not a question of view, sir. When I say I'm alive, right? What is in me that is alive? The body is, we say chemicals. Chemicals are not alive. So what is that source of life? And when it goes, I say I'm dead. When it comes, I say I'm alive. So what is that life force? What is that energy? Is a question that I would like to hold.
Energy converts into thoughts, right? So how does this life force energy is converting energy into thoughts?
I'm not saying it's converting. The energy gives rise to the body, and thought is a field that comes from the brain. There's no entity of thought. That field which arises. See, that is the interesting question which Krishnamurti posed. Does brain functioning mean that thought has to arise? Or can the brain function completely without thought interfering? And that's something that I have to experiment in my life and understand. Is such a thing possible?
Thank you, Mr. Gopalan. I think we have come to the end of the talk now. I want to thank Mr. Gopalan once again for being with us. And I'll announce next Sunday, which is 1st of January, we'll not have any session. But on 8th again, we'll have at 11 o'clock Mr. Rajan Chandy, who is from the Rishi Valley School. So he'll be talking to us on Buddhism. I don't have the exact theme on which he'll be speaking to us. So you're all welcome to join us on 8th of January. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Dubey sir. And thank you,
Thank you.
Gopalan sir. But meanwhile, we will have a lecture on 29th by Chidanandji. That will be a last lecture of this year on passion and austerity. Thank you. Thank you, Gopalan sir. Thank you, every participant. Nice of you. Modak.